I don't live in a college dorm anymore, but I do have a beer. Hopefully YouTube doesn't take this video down or demonetize me. Anyways, without further ado, let's grab a blanket, turn off your lights for true scary ghost stories that happened at college dorms. Haunted dorm room. On college campus known for ghosts, strange things happening to my daughter. Just got a phone call from my crying daughter at 2 a.m. Such a helpless feeling. And she's asking me what should she do. She goes to Ohio University in Athens, Ohio. Since this started happening, I searched online, and there are lots of stories about paranormal things happening to people living in dorms. In those dorms specifically. This started about 2 weeks ago. On 2 consecutive nights, at about 2:30 a.m., her and her roommate heard something large and metallic drop in their room. The sound didn't come from outside. They got it both times and searched her room for the source, but couldn't find anything out of place. The next night, she's lying in bed and starts to hear a rapid, raspy breathing, about 1 foot in front of her face. She sits up and asked her roommate why she's breathing like that, and her roommate says she hears it too, but it isn't her. As soon as they started talking, the sound went away. After that, they would go to sleep with the lights on and the TV playing. Nothing happened until tonight. Her roommate was asleep, and she was working on a paper in bed on her laptop. The room was dark except for the light from her laptop. She said she closed the laptop to go to sleep, and as she laid back in her bed, she felt the bed depress and a hand. She could feel fingers and a palm grabbed her hip. She screamed and jumped out of bed, turned on all the lights. Nothing was there. She called me crying hysterically. She doesn't know what to do. Nothing has ever happened to me like this, but I have an open mind. I believe her. I told her to tell it to leave. They don't want it there. She repeated it as I said, while still crying. She didn't sound very convincing. It's heartbreaking as a father. She keeps asking me what she should do. She was going to go to sleep in someone else's room for the rest of the night. Don't know if she was going to leave her roommate by herself. We aren't religious. Any suggestions? If anything else happens, I may have to have a very interesting talk with someone from student housing. Update. Just spoke to my daughter again. She said it was within a minute of closing her laptop and laying down that it happened. She said she felt the palm first and then the fingers. Said the weight on the bed was on the wall side. Her roommate is much more spooked than she is. I thought it might be the reverse. Said the roommate will not be in the room by herself anymore. She always feels eyes on her. The roommate was distraught that my daughter was touched, feels like whatever it is, doesn't like that there are any boundaries anymore. I told her to keep noise and lights on at night from now on. Good thing. She's coming home for spring break in 3 days. Strange encounter in my dorm. I go to a semi-prestigious public university in California. On the Saturday of a certain 3-day weekend, a couple of years ago, I just come back from a 6-hour walking door-to-door gig my friends and I did for money. When I got back to my dorm, I decided to take a shower. It's worth knowing the dorm was pretty empty, as everyone went home for the weekend. I took my shower in a few minutes and turned off the water. A habit I developed from living in a house with carpet floors in the bathroom. I dried myself off for 2 minutes in the shower before stepping out. The moment I opened the curtain, I heard a male voice with a British accent from above me. "Hello, help me." I was confused to say the least. I looked around the empty bathroom and no one was there. I heard the voice say the same thing, and I found that it was coming from the metal ceiling panels on the ceiling. I responded with, "Hello, who are you?" mimicking the tone of the voice I heard. I heard the voice repeat the same refrain, so I banged on the ceiling panels and lifted them up to see if anyone was in there fucking with me. There was nothing beyond those panels besides some spider webs and pipes. It would have been impossible for anyone to fit. I put the panels back and began running out of the bathroom, and I shit you not, I heard the ceiling panels banging again, just as I had done. I got the fuck out of there so hard, and found my remaining friends in the dorm to tell them someone was in the ceiling of the bathroom. I had not processed what had happened yet. I took everyone to the bathroom, and nothing. No one. My friends laughed it off and jokingly called me crazy. 3 weird parts. The floor above us is a girl's floor. Okay, no big deal. Surely, a guy snuck in the girl's bathroom above and spoke weird things to me through the vent as a prank, right? Well, number 2, the voice I heard was coming from the ceiling panel, not the vent, which was several feet away. The last weird part, if you didn't already notice, the voice begun exactly as I stepped out of the shower. Not as soon as the water turned on, like any prankster listening by the sound of the pipes would have listened for, but when I stepped out. It would have been impossible for anyone from a different floor to hear me get out of the shower like that. So, I processed this experience for a bit, and could not make sense of it. So I went to an RA and told her about the occurrence. She said with a sort of shocked, serious face that I encountered the ghost of my dorm name. She explained to me that a student died in my dorm in the 80s, being crushed in the elevator shaft. She said that she had encountered ghosts several times before, but her most creepy experience being during her time RA training over summer. In that time, the entire building was vacant, but she could hear video game sounds coming from one of the rooms. All the doors of the rooms were open at that time. I looked up that story online and found a news article confirming that it was true. A student really did die in my dorm 28 years ago. It's been 2 years now, so 30 years ago now. I have never been one to believe in ghosts, but I can't help but wonder if what I experienced was supernatural. I'm a bio major, for crying out loud, and I believe in the law of physics. But I have yet to find a way to debunk what happened to me. Visited by the Hat Man. It was winter during my freshman year of college. I was attending Ohio University in Athens, Ohio, which is considered to be one of the most haunted universities in the US. It's probably important to know that the area of campus where I lived had a large elevated sidewalk, referred to as the catwalk. The catwalk was held up by many large pillars and connected all of the dormitories to each other. It was a rainy night, and I stepped outside of my dorm to smoke a cigarette. I was standing under the catwalk to keep myself out of the rain. It was around midnight, so I was pretty tired, and I was planning to go to bed once I got back inside. It was only for a short moment when I looked across a patch of grass and see the black silhouette of a man standing under another portion of the catwalk. His shape was made very distinct by the lamppost several feet behind him. I could clearly make out the rims of his hat and the lining of his trench coat. He had no face. There was only darkness. With a blink of an eye, he was gone. I finished my cigarette and went back inside. Now, I am no stranger to seeing shadows at the corner of my eyes, but this left an impact on me. I usually can convince myself that my mind is playing tricks on me, but the vividness of this hat left a strong impression of validity. I did not feel much fear at the time. I was mostly just thinking to myself, was that thing wearing a hat? I had a feeling that other people have had similar experiences, so I googled shadow wearing hat. Sure enough, I found a decent amount of information on an entity known as the Hat Man. Feeling a bit more sane after this discovery, I learned that encounters with the Hat Man varied greatly. Some people said he was an angel, others said he was a demon. Based on my experiences, I go with demon. The most common sightings seem to occur during sleep paralysis. The thing that stood out to me the most were claims that sightings of the Hat Man were symbolic of bad things to come. This would turn out to be the case for me. Spring came along, and it was the week before finals week. By this point, I had almost forgotten my earlier paranormal experience. It was almost normal Wednesday, and I woke up to discover that I somehow ended up on my floor. I could not move from my shoulders up. After lying there for about 20 minutes, I realized this was not something I was going to sleep off. I felt around for my phone and dialed 911. After various x-rays, it was determined I had broken 3 vertebrae in my spine. I had a successful spinal fusion surgery and am doing well. I just wanted to share my story somewhere. Sure, it could have been a spooky coincidence, but I feel that there is a connection. I believe my friends and I were haunted by a deceased student in our dorm. Now, almost 4 years ago, I started my freshman year at a university in the Midwest. I remember how afraid I was, not because of anything paranormal, but because I was on the fast path of being on my own. My parents and I arrived at my dorm and began to haul my belongings up to the 3rd floor. It was a very old dormitory, so there were no elevators, but I was so excited I couldn't have cared less about the sudden workout. I kissed my parents goodbye and began to excitedly unpack my belongings and meet my floor mates. I remember how utterly terrified I was. I was intimidated by everyone I met, but no one could tell what was beneath my bubbly guise. I quickly got to know the 3 girls who lived in a room beside me, and 1 girl who lived adjacent from me. It was like love at first sight, and we all became very close. We made up 3 or 5 rooms that was a small connector hallway. On one side of us was a very long hallway, the girls' side. On the other side, the boys. We were sandwiched in between. The room directly across from mine was empty. I lived in between the bathroom and the triple room. The first weekend was a blast. I drank a bit in high school, but college was an entirely different ballgame. I had no idea parties could be so big, bars so packed, or that I could get so drunk. I quickly learned my limits, but that very first weekend was when I experienced my first small, but still strange occurrence. Be aware, I was drunk when this happened. Like I said before, I wasn't new to drinking, but I never did this at this caliber. My friends and I stumbled back to our new home after the bars closed, and my roommate and I retired to our room. I woke up at some point in the night with an overwhelming urge to use a restroom, so I rolled out of bed and made the short trip there. The hallway itself was completely silent. I was fine on my way to the bathroom, but after I did my business and started my walk and run back, I was feeling thoroughly spooked by the eerie silence. As I reached my door, the silence was broken by a resounding, "Hey!" It was higher pitched and sounded like a girl that was close behind me. Scared, I listened intently, waiting for a follow-up voice of "door shut," but there was nothing. The following week, we had our first floor meeting. It was there that I learned about the student that had died unexpectedly in his room 2 years ago. The RAs tried to pass it off as a rumor, but was confirmed to us by their boss. The room buzzed with morbid excitement, and I was no exception. Everyone wanted to know the grisly details. How did he die? How long did it take for someone to notice? Who found him? And most importantly, in what room? The boss RA assured us that the room was vacant, and would most likely remain so until the entire dorm could be renovated the next year. As the beginning weeks went on, the meeting was pushed to the back of my mind. Nothing unusual happened a few months, give or take. Around November or December, my 3 friends that lived next to me, the one across from us, and I went out to dinner to celebrate our successful first semester. We spent the evening reminiscing about our antics throughout the past months, and generally just enjoying each other's company. I remember how the mood shifted when my neighbor Corey, who was normally a straight-laced kind of gal, asked Molly, her roommate, about what had happened the night before. Corey let out a kind of chuckle of disbelief as she asked, and Molly's lightheartedly persona quickly faded. Corey told us the night before she had woken up to use the restroom. When she came back to the room and began to climb up to the top bunk, Molly popped up from her bed and a loft bed across the bunk bed and asked, "Who's getting into bed with you?" Frightened, Corey groped around the bed to find out who had followed her, but there was no one. Molly insisted that there had been a person climbing up the ladder behind her, but they even turned on a light by Molly's bed to find nothing unusual. We were all freaked out. I hadn't had another experience, and I don't think any of my other friends had either. Nevertheless, the night continued and the mood lightened, and though the incident never left our minds, we passed it off as Molly just being half asleep and confused in the dark. No big events happened between then and leaving for winter break, but when we all came back for spring semester, the strange occurrences increased. A couple weeks after being back, I was alone in my dorm room, watching TV from my bed. In this dorm, every room had a built-in double wardrobe with a TV stand and large set of drawers in between. The two beds in my room sat on either side of the room and faced the wardrobe wall head-on. As I was sitting there, I noticed the door to my roommate's wardrobe swing open. It wasn't fast, but it was deliberate. I swear, this was not the work of a draft or wind. My room and window were closed. I was alone. My first instinct was to run to the hall, but the closet that opened on its own was right next to the doorway out. Instead, I burst into tears and yelled for Sam, a friend who lived across the hall from me. She came in, and when I told her what had happened, immediately began to think of excuses and half-jokingly called me crazy. I left my room and didn't go back until my roommate was home. I told her what happened, but I don't think she believed me. After a few more weeks, she moved in with one of her sorority sisters, giving me the room to myself. I pushed the beds together and made a huge one. I had 2 closets and the entire wall of shelves to myself. I did not have enough to fill all the space, but I didn't care because I was finally free of my roommate's annoying habits. The first couple weeks, I had to sleep with the lights on. I had a bad feeling sleeping there alone, but nothing happened. Sometimes, I even felt bad just being in there alone, sleeping or not. At some point mid-semester, I fell ill with an awful stomach bug that left me quarantined in my room for a couple days. I was so sick that I really didn't give a shit about anything, except trying not to feel so awful all the time. I was dehydrated, so I spent most of my time drifting in and out of consciousness, more so out. This was my first time being sick away from the comfort of home. I will never forget how I felt. Thankfully, after that, I was able to get more restful sleep, including with the lights off. One night, I struggled to fall asleep, my mind racing because I had a lot on my plate at the time and a huge day waiting for me in the morning. In my pre-sleep haze, I watched a small red ball of what I can only describe as static electricity appear on top of covered wires that ran across the ceiling. I don't recall feeling frightened, but I also don't remember much about that night because I was so exhausted. I told my friends about this one too. I only remember one of them telling me about some connection between ghosts and electricity. They seemed skeptical. Sometime after the electric ball, I'd say maybe a month or so later, I skipped my morning class, but still had an afternoon one, so I got up to take a shower. I was late. When I went to the bathroom, they were cleaning the showers, so I went to the bathroom upstairs. As I walked to the bathroom, I noticed the door next to it was blank. This was only noticeable because the occupants' names were always on the doors. I didn't investigate at the time, but the pieces fell together anyways. I was confident that the room above mine was the infamous room they had told us about at the beginning of the year. The girls that had moved in to the empty room across from me in the prior semester mentioned that they had taken the last available room in our dorm. It was possible, though, that the occupants moved out after the first semester ended. I didn't say anything about my potential discovery, and I was so creeped out. I didn't want to think that it could be true. Around the last month of the semester, Corey and Molly's third roommate, Sam's roommate, and I were standing in the hallway, gathered around Sarah's door. The door was open as Sam finished her makeup in the mirror she had placed against her open door. Across from that, she had placed a few scented pine cones on a shelf. As we were talking and goofing around, something small flew through the doorway, past all of us, and smacked into the wall across from us. We all stared at the flying object in horror. It was a friggin' pine cone. There was absolutely nothing that could have caused that to fly across her room and smack into the wall with such force. We're talking a good 15 feet. Sam and her roommate immediately lost it. Her roommate and Ashley cried. I felt a mix of dread and victory. It was like we and I had proof for all the weird things that had happened to us over the year. The night before Molly went home for the summer, Ashley, who slept on the lower bunk below Corey, woke up that night to the sound of a voice. When she opened her eyes, she saw Molly sitting up in bed, talking to the ground below her bed. When Ashley told Molly to stop, Molly laid back down and was quiet. I moved out 3 days later on a Thursday. The only one of us left behind me was Sam. As I took down the command hooks and held my string lights, I noticed something strange on the walls, right under the ceiling in the corner of the room. I got close and touched it. It was mold. I left a few hours later and felt so relieved. Some other details that may or may not be relevant. I went through a pretty severe depression during the middle and end of the year and gained weight, mostly from my increased beer intake. There was always bugs in my room, and I'm not talking flies and ants, I mean big-ass spiders and multiple centipedes. There were even wasps in my room on 2 separate occasions. Once I refused to sleep in there for 2 nights because I lost 2 very big, very different spiders on the same day. I'm friggin' terrified of bugs. It's a full-blown phobia. I went to therapy for it as a kid. A squirrel broke through my friggin' screen and dashed about my room while I was in there getting ready for class. I've always been a bit scared of squirrels because of one that ran into my house when I was very young. The weirdest part, I lived on the 3rd floor and there was not a single tree, shutter, or windowsill in the immediate vicinity of my window. After the first incident with Molly, we named the ghost. We actually talked to him on occasion. Never seriously like a seance, but mostly in a light-hearted manner. I think that's about it. If you made it through this, I'd love to hear some thoughts and opinions on my experience.